look at how China responded to the crisis, and I'm sure there's going to be pushback. Okay, it sounds beautiful. Cuba was able to handle the crisis, but the right wing would be like, well, they're authoritarian, and they can just lock people up for being on the street, and we're a freedom-loving country in the U.S., and we don't believe in that kind of those kinds of measures. Although parts of Europe are, parts of Europe are doing those types of measures, locking down neighborhoods, ticketing people for going outside of 2 kilometers of their home. How authoritarian is it? let's on a scale of China and like Utah, like where are we?
Well, I don't know. I don't know China well, but I think Cuba is it can be very strict when it comes to obeying the law. Right. So there have been some cases reported, and these are things I haven't been able to verify because it is very difficult to verify things like this in Cuba. To get this type of information. So you see reports about it, but actually getting to the source and figuring out what actually happened is often impossible. So there were reports of people going to jail for not wearing a mask, for example. There were reports of people who escaped from an isolation center and were sentenced to jail time as a result. They took that very seriously because if you're in an isolation center, you're suspected of having COVID. If you escape, you could be spreading the disease to other people. And so, I wouldn't say that that's widespread. Right. I think that people generally, don't have a problem with that. They understand that by wearing a mask, you're keeping everybody safe. So why would you, flaunt that? And the fact that there is enforcement of it means that people don't, openly flaunt this, which I know has happened in the United States. So one question is look at it, is it authoritarian or not? Another way of looking at it is it's a country that values the well-being of the collective over the well-being of the individual. I mean, individual rights are sacrificed in this case, for example, because it's better for the country as a whole. It's better for the majority, for the collective. And I think, that's clearly the sort of the thinking behind those measures and the enforcement of them.
Right. What was the testing like early on? It's interesting that someone would escape a center, a containment or a quarantine center. But if there was appropriate testing, I guess it depends on what stage. That seems to be a big problem in the U.S. still. The president is saying that we have all the testing, but of course we do not. Yeah. So what is it like in Cuba? Is there access to supplies, number one? And number two, what is the testing situation like?
That's a good question. Well, as far as the escape from the quarantine center, you'll see if you check out the report that we did from the journalist who was inside there, it was pretty open. Like anyone could just walk off. There wasn't like a jail or anything. Like you could just leave. Or just, you're not supposed to do that. But as far as the testing, that was one of my biggest concerns early on because all I was reading in the media from the U.S. and you have to have tests. Like the whole key is you have to have a test, and it didn't seem like Cuba did. Because I knew people who were going in trying to get a test and to a hospital, whatever. No, we don't have tests here. This is not where you test people. And there was it was a question. They weren't. They organized daily press briefings, and there's a lot of just a ton of information, statistics. They're pretty forthcoming with stats and info. But in testing, it seemed like I wasn't getting the information. At one point, they said that they had more than 100,000 tests, I think. And, but I wasn't hearing of they're not going around testing people, who are not suspected. It seems, I get the impression, I don't know this for sure, but that they're very much conservative with the tests. So they will use the test for the people that are suspected. So once you end up in an isolation center and then before they let you go, they test you. And so that's basically, so I was concerned because it seemed like this was the key to it all. But yet Cuba has been able to really keep the numbers low. And I think it's because of those other things. They haven't maybe done as much testing. And I don't know that for the fact. I don't have the numbers on testing. But their contact tracing and their proactiveness with that has been, I think, probably much stronger than in other countries. And then the just door-to-door, the doctors, just everywhere, doctors, medical students, nurses, just going door to door, just frequent contact with people. And at the slightest symptom, they're taking care of it. They're looking into it. So I think that is that maybe those other factors have overcome possibly not testing massively.
Because of the sanctions that have increased under Trump, how much of the sanctions have affected the supply, the medical supplies, and just the situation? I mean, our government has a history. The United States government has a history of punishing those communities and foreign countries that we supply aid to at the worst moments, when they probably need it the most. So I'm just very curious to see how that's played out while this crisis is underway.
Yeah, that's very much playing out here in Cuba. Well, first, you have to understand, when coronavirus hit Cuba, it was already in a very precarious situation economically because of the sanctions.
Right.
Trump, we're doing a documentary series right now, which we hope to launch before elections. And it's called Trump's War on Cuba, because it is essentially, he's tightened the embargo in many ways. And it amounts to economic warfare. So, Obama opened things up, and there were tons of American tourists who were coming here. That had come to a halt. He had stopped cruise ships coming here. He had stopped flights into every airport except for Havana. He had limited the amount that Cuban Americans could send to family members in Cuba through remittances. He'd squashed an MLB deal, a Major League Baseball deal with Cuba, which could have helped Cuba economically. They implemented Title III of Helms-Burton, a law which basically allowed allowed anyone who claimed to own property, or U.S. nationals who own property who claimed to own property before the revolution that was expropriated, to sue Cuba or sue other companies that now quote traffic in that property. So, for example, Spanish hotel firm is getting sued because they have a joint venture with Cuba. And those lawsuits haven't really progressed that much, but it's really stopped the flow of investment into Cuba. On top of all that, they've blocked oil shipments from Venezuela. Wow. So, Cuba's an oil-based economy like anywhere in the world. So you can imagine the impact that that's had. I mean, I was here when that really started happening, and suddenly there's no buses and there's huge lines and there's just not enough fuel to go around. And on top of that, you've got, now there are exceptions to the embargo as far as medicine and food, but essentially it's still there because no medical companies in the United States don't want to sell anything to Cuba because they're afraid of being sanctioned. In fact, the United States, the government just a few days ago levied a $250,000 sanction on a U.S. agricultural company that was selling food to Cuba. So what companies can want to do business with Cuba? If you don't follow the rules exactly right, you might get a sanction slapped on you. And this has happened to a lot of banks last year. A Panamanian bank and a Swiss financial company stopped doing business with Cuba, Cuba doesn't have a lot of banks that they can do business with as far as buying medicine or other things they need from other countries because the banks don't want to do business. They're afraid of getting sanctioned by the United States. So last year there was a crisis of medicine, huge medicine shortage in the middle of the year. And in large part it was because suddenly this bank stopped doing business with Cuba, and Cuba had to scramble to find another bank that would do it. It took them time. In the meantime, even though Cuba produces the vast majority of medicine, it needs raw materials to be able to do that, and it wasn't able to purchase those. So now, given all that, coronavirus starts. And early on, there was a shipment of donations from Jack Ma, the Chinese billionaire, that was blocked because Avianca Airlines, the Colombian airline that was supposed to take the medical supplies to Cuba, refused to do so because of U.S. sanctions. And just recently, an official in charge of importing medicine said that a big container full of medicine, medical supplies, actually made it to a port in Cuba, but then the shipping company said we can't unload this because this would be a violation of the embargo, and had to take it back to where they had brought it from. So you can imagine how the type of impact this has on the economy. And I interviewed once the head of one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies here that produces basic medicines. He said the cost of their medicine is about 50% higher than it would be. And then there are delays, there's shortages, there's all sorts of problems related to that. So yeah, I wouldn't say like there's an acute problem specifically during COVID. In fact, Cuba insists that they have enough resources, and it appears they do to fight COVID, and that they certainly seem to be doing a really good job. But the economy as a whole has been hit hard, and it's been over the course of many decades, but it's really amped up under Trump.
Thank you for watching The Nomiki Show. You can support us on YouTube by clicking subscribe, like, and sharing to get those alerts. And patrons, well, they make this show run on time. So thanks to all of you who have joined our community already. If you like our content and want more, from special segments to interviews and merch, you can join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. I'm spending all of my iced coffee money on other people's shows because I think this is the time that we have to support our independent media.